Recording. Hi everyone, this is Moni Singh and welcome to Teaching STEM. We are continuing down the pathway on looking at the four key characteristics of impactful STEM lessons. And I want to focus today on repetition. So, the four characteristics being immersion, repetition, creation, and dealing with the depths. Today, our focus is repetition. So, I want to first talk about what do I mean by repetition. We're not necessarily saying you repeat the same activity again and again. Um, we're talking about something a little bit different. But first, we all hear the saying, practice makes perfect. I don't know about that exactly, but I do know that practice makes better, right? It makes better. We all know that. And so it's important that whatever concept we are bringing to children, we bring it in a way that they're able to practice it multiple times in multiple different forms. And that creates more of those neural connections and learning sticks. And research has shown that, right? The more synapses, the neurons, right? We have neurons in our brain, and the more synapses we can create, the more learning sticks in the mind. So we know that, right? Practice is important. So now, when you are dealing with STEM, how do you create that repetition? There are three elements to repetition as we think about in our impactful STEM classes. Number one is repetition over time, and this is where you want to space out that learning over time. So if you have depending on the complexity of the concept that you're dealing with, maybe you want to lend it a couple of classes. And even if you wrap it up in one class, making sure you bring it back again in the next class and discuss the application of that. So you want to space it and discuss that over multiple classes so that the child can really grasp the context, the concept, and then also have it connected with everything else that they're learning. So that's the repetition over time. The second element is the repetition in form. And by that, what I mean is that you're creating activities which engage children in many different ways. You want to engage as many of their senses as you can because that again creates sticky learning, more connections being built in the brain. And um and so you create that in form as well. So maybe one time you do a hands-on activity, the next time you're doing brainstorming with that concept, maybe you do research with that concept, you build something, experiment. So you can create variety in terms of bringing that learning home for children. And the third element is a recap. Let me actually talk a little bit more about give some examples so we can discuss a little bit more about each of these. So about the repetition over time and inform. Let me take an example. Let's say you are teaching kids how to code, and your focus is on creating loops. Right. And so you could give them an assignment. The first time could be about create a simple loop, and so that way, when I give a number to your program, it generates the next 10 numbers in sequence. So, for example, if I give number 10, the program should result into numbers 11, 12, all the way to 20. Or if I give the number 8 as input, then the program generates 9, 10, 11, so on and so forth, and generate a loop to create this output for us. The next time you could give a different assignment, and it may deal with something like they have an animated character, and you want to have that character do a dance, and so you need to have a couple of steps, and you have the character repeat that step 10 times. So, for example, maybe their character has. Uh, like 1, 2, 3, and then jump, 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 and maybe this is the step, the three hand moves and three jumps, and that repeats 10 times, and that's the dance to do. So again, you are basically giving them different assignments so they can experiment with and play around with loops and learn about how to implement that in their program. If you're working with older children, you could possibly give them a research project, right, to figure out and to see if there are what's the impact of looping in the computer's processing time. Are there certain loops more efficient than the others? Um, Let me take another example. Let's say you're working with younger children and you're dealing with environmental, engineering. And let's say a topic that you're discussing is 3 R's of helping the environment, right? Reduce, reuse, and recycle. And so you might allot, let's say, 3 different classes to deal with that. You introduce the 3 R's in your first class, and then during the first class, you talk about the concept of reducing, right? How can you reduce waste, for example? And you could do different activities around scavenger hunt and other ways in which the children can reduce wastage. The scavenger hunt being that maybe they're detecting where we are wasting, right? In what situations we find that we might be wasting electricity, for example. Um, and then having them think about what are some ways that they can reduce the consumption of electricity. Maybe making sure that they switch off the light before as soon as they leave, as they're leaving the room. Your next class you focus on reusing, and then the third class you come into the recycling concept, and perhaps you have kids bring some waste products and use them to create something else, a keepsake uh, product, right? So again, you can take it in multiple different directions, but the point being that you're repeating that concept, you're having the kids practice over time and in many different forms. Now, the last element I mentioned, recapping. And let me take some time about that because it is so important and I can never overemphasize that. Recap, recap, recap. You can never forget it. You should always do that. The way we always used to structure our classes, right? The way we structure our classes is that we would have. Let's say you are doing only an hour-long STEM class. Maybe it's an after-school program or just a rotation, and we would always keep a couple of minutes in the beginning to recap what was done before in the prior class, and then to talk about what is it that we're going to be discussing today, how what you're discussing today connects with what was discussed before. So we always begin with that piece, then you do the activities, and then again leaving some time towards the end so you can recap what did we just learn and how it all connects together. Right. And so if you have maybe a longer duration program, maybe you're running a camp, don't wait for a recap till the end. You keep recapping throughout the day, right? Every time you do an activity, okay, kids, so here is what we learned. This is how it connects back to what we learned yesterday or earlier in the day, and so on and so forth. You want to keep doing that because, again, you're trying to bring the point home for children, and recapping, it's so powerful, and you can do it in so many different ways. We have, I think, 15 to 20 different ways in which we recap, and I'll be happy to share that in one of my other episodes with you guys. But just remember that recapping is a very important aspect. That's something you do every single time you are with the kids, every single class. So remember repetition, um, over time, in form, in different forms, and then also recapping. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day.